The voice reached him through stone and steel and the thick silence of midnight, a thread of sound so raw it stopped him mid-stride on the empty pavement. Wulfric Falkenrath had walked these city streets for 3 centuries, and nothing in them had made him pause in decades. But the voice slipping through the cracked window of the 4th-floor apartment twisted something in his chest he'd thought long dead. It wasn't trained or polished. It carried no audience. The woman sang to herself the way drowning people clung to wreckage, desperate and alone. He stood below the window, white hair catching streetlight, and listened. She sang an old folk melody, something human and fragile, and every note ached. He could hear the tears in her throat. She was singing to forget something, or perhaps to remember it differently, to reshape pain into something bearable. He knew that impulse. He'd spent 100 years trying to bury the same need. When the song ended, he waited. The silence stretched. Then she began again, a different melody this time, sadder. He followed the sound. The apartment building stood in a neighborhood that smelled of exhaust and old brick, where the paint peeled and the stairs groaned under the weight of too many lives pressed too close together. He could have entered through her window, could have blurred up the fire escape in a breath, but he didn't. Instead, he walked. He circled the block. He stood across the street and watched the light in her window, yellow and faint, and let her voice pour over him like rain after drought. She sang for hours. He followed for hours. When dawn began to pale the eastern sky, he finally forced himself away, retreating to the underground manor that sprawled beneath the old cathedral district where his court waited and the stone walls kept out the sun. But her voice followed him down into the dark. He had not allowed music in his halls for a century. He had forbidden it the night he buried Isolde, the singer whose throat had been torn out by rivals who wanted to prove he'd grown soft. They'd been right. He had grown soft. He'd let love make him careless, had let beauty distract him from the knife in the shadows. He'd learned. He'd become the kind of king who did not make that mistake twice. But now this stranger's voice haunted him, and he could not make himself regret having heard it. The next night, he returned. She was singing again, a different song, just as broken. He positioned himself in the shadows across from her building and closed his eyes. The melody wound through him, loosening knots he hadn't known were still tied. She had a good voice, untrained but true, with a smokiness that came from tears or exhaustion or both. It made him think of autumn, of things ending beautifully. He stayed until dawn again. On the 3rd night, he made himself wait until midnight before going to her street. The discipline felt thin. He was a king. He ruled the eastern territories with a hand that did not waver, commanded the loyalty of 200 vampires who would die at his word. Yet, here he stood, drawn back to a cracked window and a stranger's grief like some lovesick fledgling. But when her voice rose into the night, he stopped caring about the indignity. This time, the song broke halfway through. He heard her sob just once, raw and wrenching. Then, silence. He waited, tense, willing her to continue. She didn't. After 20 minutes of quiet, he finally turned to leave. Are you going to keep lurking, or are you going to knock? He spun. She stood in the building's front doorway, wrapped in an oversized sweater, barefoot on the cold concrete. Her hair was dark, pulled into a careless knot. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. She looked exhausted and defiant and utterly human. Beautiful. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said, which was a lie. He'd been disturbing her privacy for 3 nights. You've been standing across the street for hours. She crossed her arms, shivering slightly in the October cold. If you're going to mug me, just get it over with. I don't have anything worth stealing. I'm not here to rob you. Then why are you here? He should have lied. He was good at lying, had centuries of practice. But something about her directness, her exhaustion, made him tell the truth. You're singing. I've been listening to your singing. She blinked. For a moment she looked genuinely confused, as though the idea that anyone would want to hear her voice was incomprehensible. Then her expression hardened. I'm not looking for a stalker. I'm not stalking you. He stopped. What was he doing? I heard you 3 nights ago. Your voice stopped me. I've come back to hear it again. That's literally what stalking is. I haven't approached you. I haven't entered your home. I've simply listened. From the street. At night. For 3 nights in a row. She rubbed her arms, still shivering. Look, I don't know what you want, but I'm not interested. I sing because I need to, not because I want an audience. I know, he said quietly. I can hear it. You're singing to survive something. Her expression cracked just for a second. Then she rebuilt it, brick by brick. You don't know anything about me. No, he agreed, but I know what grief sounds like. The words hung between them. She stared at him, and he saw her taking in his appearance for the first time, the unnatural pallor of his skin, the white hair that fell past his shoulders, the old-fashioned cut of his coat. Her eyes narrowed. What are you? Humans didn't usually ask that question. They made excuses, rationalized, refused to see, but she looked at him and knew immediately that he was other. He appreciated the intelligence. Someone who understands pain, he said, which was true enough. She studied him for a long moment. He could hear her heartbeat, quick and nervous. She should have gone back inside. She should have run. Instead, she said, My brother died 6 weeks ago. I sing because if I don't, I'll scream. That's what you've been listening to, me trying not to scream. The honesty of it hit him like a blade. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't help. She turned toward the door, then paused. If you come back tomorrow night, at least introduce yourself first. This anonymous lurking thing is creepy. Then she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her. He stood in the empty street and felt something shift in his chest, some old lock turning. The next night, he knocked on her door at 11. She opened it still dressed, still awake, unsurprised to see him. You came back? You told me to introduce myself. I didn't think you actually would. She stepped aside. Come in then. I'm Sienna Oakes. Wulfric Falkenrath. He crossed the threshold into a tiny apartment that smelled of tea and old books. The furniture was second-hand, the walls bare except for a few photographs. One showed a young man with Sienna's dark hair and sharp chin, smiling at the camera. Her brother, he assumed. She caught him looking. That's Marcus. He was 23. What happened? Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Her voice was flat, practiced. She'd said these words before, enough times that they'd lost their texture. He died instantly. That's what they tell me. Like it's supposed to be comforting. It isn't. No. She moved to the kitchen, filled a kettle. Do you drink tea, or is that not your thing? So she'd guessed what he was. Smart. I can drink tea. I won't get much from it. But you can taste it? Yes? She nodded, setting out 2 cups. I looked you up, you know, after last night. Falkenrath, that's an old name. German, I think, means Falcon's Council or something like that. Old German nobility, he confirmed. A long time ago. How long? 347 years. She turned to face him fully, leaning against the counter. You're a vampire. Yes. Okay. She said it calmly, as though he'd just confirmed he was left-handed. I figured. The whole pale skin, white hair, hanging around at night thing. Plus, you move wrong. Too smooth. Does it frighten you? Should it? Most humans think so. She poured boiling water over tea bags, handed him a cup. I'm too tired to be frightened. My brother died and I can't sleep, and I sing to stop thinking about how he's just gone. Like he never existed. A vampire on my doorstep doesn't even crack the top 10 things I'm worried about. She sat on the threadbare couch, tucking her feet under her. Why did you keep coming back? Really? He could have lied again. Should have. Instead, he sat in the chair across from her and told the truth. 100 years ago, I loved a woman who sang. Her name was Isolde. She had the most beautiful voice I'd ever heard before or since. I would have done anything for her. I did do anything for her. I brought her into my world, gave her immortality, built her concert halls and stages. I was a fool. He stopped, the old pain still sharp enough to cut. My enemies knew I loved her. They used that. They killed her to hurt me, to prove I'd grown weak. They were right. Sienna watched him over the rim of her cup. What did you do? I destroyed them, every one of them, and their bloodlines. It took me 3 years. He met her eyes. Then I banned music from my court. I couldn't bear to hear it. For 100 years my halls have been silent. Until you heard me. Until I heard you. He set down his tea, untouched. Your voice broke something open. I don't know if that's good or bad yet. I'm not her, Sienna said quietly. I'm not a replacement for whoever you lost. I know. You sound nothing like her. Your pain is your own. He leaned forward. But hearing you sing reminded me that beauty can exist even in grief. I'd forgotten that. They sat in silence for a while. The radiator clanked and hissed. Somewhere in the building, a dog barked. Will you sing for me? He asked finally. Now, if you're willing. She considered, then set down her tea and stood. She didn't perform, didn't posture. She simply opened her mouth and sang, the same aching folk melody he'd first heard 3 nights ago. Her eyes closed, her hands twisted together. She sang like he wasn't there, like she was alone with her grief. He listened and felt the ice around his heart crack a little further. When she finished, she opened her eyes and found him watching her. That was for me, not for you. I know. Good. She sat back down. You can come back tomorrow if you want. I'm up late most nights anyway. He did. Over the following weeks, it became a routine. He would arrive at 11. She would let him in. They would talk for a while about nothing important, her job at the bookstore, his observations about how the city had changed, the weather, the neighbor's cat. Then she would sing, and he would listen, and something in both of them would ease. She asked him about being a vampire. He told her about the hunger, the strength, the endless years. She asked if he missed being human. He said he barely remembered it. She told him about Marcus, about growing up in foster care together, about how he'd been the only family she had, about how the drunk driver had gotten 3 years and would probably serve 18 months, about how that felt like nothing, like Marcus's life had been worth 18 months. I want to burn the world down sometimes, she admitted one night. Is that terrible? No, he said. It's human. Is that why you killed the ones who murdered Isolde? Because you wanted to burn the world down? Yes. And because I needed them to know that touching what was mine carried a price. He looked at her. I would do it again. Even knowing it wouldn't bring her back? Even then, some things demand blood. She didn't look shocked or horrified. She just nodded slowly. I think I understand that. He found himself looking forward to the nights with her. He told himself it was just the music, just the novelty of hearing singing again after so long, but he knew he was lying. He liked her sharp edges, her refusal to soften her grief into something palatable. He liked how she didn't fear him, didn't fawn or flatter. She treated him like a person, not a monster or a king. It was dangerous. He noticed when he started thinking of reasons to see her outside their usual nights. Noticed when he found himself lingering in the bookstore where she worked, watching her recommend novels to customers with the same intensity she brought to everything. Noticed when he started wanting her. That was when he should have stopped, when he should have walked away before this became something that could be used against him again. He didn't. One night in November, she didn't sing. She just curled on the couch and cried, silent tears streaming down her face. He moved to sit beside her without thinking, and she turned into him, pressing her face against his chest. He held her, feeling the warmth of her, the fragility, and wanted to destroy anything that had ever hurt her. I'm sorry, she whispered against his shirt. I'm sorry. I thought I could hold it together tonight. You don't have to. It's been almost 3 months. Everyone keeps saying it'll get easier. It doesn't feel easier. It won't, he said quietly. Not for a long time, maybe never. You'll just learn to carry it differently. She pulled back enough to look up at him. Her eyes were swollen and red, and still the most beautiful thing he'd seen in a century. How do you do it? How do you keep going when you've lost someone? You find reasons. Small ones at first, then larger ones. He reached up without thinking and brushed a tear from her cheek. Sometimes someone gives you a reason. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away from his touch. Wulfric. I should go, he said abruptly, standing. He'd let himself get too close, let his guard slip too far. It's late. It's only midnight. You usually stay until 3. Not tonight. He moved toward the door. Wait. She stood, crossing to him. Did I do something wrong? No. You did everything right. That's the problem. He forced himself to meet her eyes. I'm falling in love with you, Sienna. That's not safe. Not for you. Not for me. She stared at him. Because of what happened before. Because I'm a king. Because I have enemies. Because everyone I've ever loved has been used against me. He opened the door. I won't let that happen to you. Don't I get a say in this? No. He stepped into the hallway. I'm sorry. He left before she could respond, before he could change his mind. He didn't go back. For 2 weeks he stayed away. He threw himself into court business, into the endless political maneuvering that kept his territory stable. He met with his advisors, settled disputes, reminded everyone why he was king. He was cold and efficient and utterly in control. At night, alone in his chambers, he thought about her voice and wanted to howl. His second-in-command, Lucien, finally cornered him in the council room after a particularly brutal session of negotiations. You're worse than usual. I'm fine. You just threatened to execute Mikhail for suggesting we renegotiate the border treaties. We've been renegotiating those treaties for 60 years. It's basically a hobby at this point. Wulfric said nothing. Lucien studied him with ancient eyes. He was older than Wulfric by 2 centuries, had been his advisor since Wulfric took the throne. It's a woman, isn't it? Leave it alone. The court's noticed you've been disappearing at night. They're starting to talk. Let them talk. Wulfric, Lucien's voice softened. It's been 100 years. You can't punish yourself forever. I'm not punishing myself. I'm being smart. The moment I care about someone, the moment I show weakness, someone will use it against me. Against her. So you'll what? Be alone for the rest of eternity? That's not living. That's just not dying. It's safer. Safer, Lucien repeated. You sound afraid. That landed like a slap. Wulfric turned on him, fangs extending, power flooding the room. Lucien didn't flinch. He'd known Wulfric too long to be intimidated. I am not afraid. Then prove it. Stop hiding behind Isolde's death like it's a shield. She wouldn't have wanted this for you. You didn't know her. I knew her well enough to know she loved you, and I know you loved her. But she's been gone for 100 years, and you're still here. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to live again or just haunt your own halls. Wulfric forced his power back down, forced his fangs to retract. I don't want to talk about this. Of course you don't. Lucien moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, the court would adapt. They always do. And anyone stupid enough to come after someone you love will meet the same fate as the last ones. You've made sure everyone knows that price. He left Wulfric alone with his thoughts. That night, Wulfric found himself standing outside Sienna's building again. He didn't go in. He just stood in the shadows and listened. She was singing, but the sound was different now, flatter, more mechanical. The pain was still there, but the hope beneath it had dimmed. He'd done that. He'd given her something and then ripped it away. He was turning to leave when he heard the scream. Sienna's voice, raw with terror, cut through the night. He was moving before conscious thought, blurring up the fire escape, crashing through her window. The glass shattered around him as he landed in her living room. A vampire he didn't recognize had Sienna pressed against the wall, one hand around her throat. The stranger's eyes went wide when he saw Wulfric. My lord, I didn't. She's not marked. Wulfric moved. He was across the room in a heartbeat, had the stranger by the throat, slammed him into the opposite wall hard enough to crack plaster. You touched her. I didn't know she was yours. She is mine. The words came out in a snarl, ancient and absolute. And you will die for this. Please. Wulfric didn't let him finish. He tore the vampire's head from his shoulders in one smooth motion, let the body crumble to ash on Sienna's floor. Then he turned to her. She was pressed against the wall, shaking, one hand at her throat. Wulfric. He crossed to her, catching her face between his hands. Are you hurt? Did he bite you? No, he was going to, but then you... She was shaking harder now, adrenaline and shock catching up. He came through the window. I was singing and he just appeared and grabbed me. You're safe now. He pulled her against him, felt her heart hammering against his chest. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you. You came back. I heard you scream. I will always come when you need me. She pulled back enough to look up at him. But you said it wasn't safe. You said, I was wrong. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing you that I tried to lose you first, but I can't stay away. I tried. I failed. He leaned his forehead against hers. I love you. Sienna. I love your voice and your strength and your sharp edges. I love how you sing through your pain. I love how you see me and aren't afraid. And I am terrified of what that means, but I'm more terrified of living without you. I love you too, she whispered. I fell in love with you weeks ago. I thought you knew. I hoped. I didn't let myself believe. Believe it. She kissed him, fierce and desperate and alive. He kissed her back, tasting salt from her tears, feeling the warmth of her mouth against his. She was everything fragile and human and precious, and he wanted to keep her forever. When they finally broke apart, she said, "What happens now?" "Now I take you somewhere safe, my home where I can protect you properly." He glanced at the broken window, the ash on the floor. "This place isn't secure. Anyone could get in." "Anyone did get in." "Exactly. Will you come with me?" She looked around her shabby apartment at the photographs of Marcus, at the life she'd built from grief and determination. Then she looked at him. Yes. He carried her out into the night, moving too fast for human eyes to follow, taking her down into the earth where his true home waited. The entrance was hidden beneath an old cathedral, downstairs that spiraled into darkness. She clung to him, trust and terror warring in her scent, and he held her close. The halls of his manor opened before them, vast and stone and absolutely silent. His vampires appeared from doorways and alcoves, drawn by his presence, their eyes going wide when they saw the human woman in his arms. "My lord," Lucian appeared at his side, taking in Sienna with one swift glance. "Who is this?" "Sienna Oaks. She'll be staying here under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." Lucian's eyebrows rose. "Understood. Should I prepare the east wing?" "No. She stays with me." Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Wulfric ignored them, carrying Sienna through the halls to his private chambers. He set her down gently on the edge of his bed, the first living person to enter this room in 100 years. She looked around, taking in the heavy furniture, the tapestries, the absolute absence of anything modern. "You really are a king." "I really am. This is your court. These are your people." "Yes. And you just announced to all of them that I'm yours." "I did." He knelt before her, meeting her eyes. "I will not hide you. I will not pretend you don't matter. You are under my protection now, and everyone in this territory will know it. That's the only way to keep you safe." "What if someone challenges that? What if they come after me anyway?" "Then I will destroy them." He said it simply, a fact like gravity. "I have done it before. I will do it again. No one will touch you, Sienna. I swear it on my crown." She reached out, running her fingers through his white hair. "I believe you." Over the following days, she settled into his world with surprising ease. He'd expected her to be overwhelmed, frightened, perhaps regretful. Instead, she explored the manor with curiosity, asked questions about vampire politics, and charmed half his court with her directness. The other half remained suspicious. "She's human," Lady Ravenna pointed out in council 3 days after Sienna's arrival. "Fragile, temporary. Why should we adjust our court for someone who will be dead in 60 years? "Because she is mine," Wulfric said coldly. "That should be reason enough." "With respect, my lord, the last time you brought a singer into our halls, it ended badly." The room went silent. Wulfric rose slowly from his throne, power radiating from him in waves. "Are you questioning my judgment, Ravenna?" "I'm questioning your heart." Ravenna didn't back down, which he respected even as he wanted to rip out her throat. "You banned music for 100 years because losing Isolde destroyed you. Now you've brought another singer into our midst, and you expect us to believe it will end differently?" "It will end differently because I am different." He descended from the dais, moving with predatory grace. "I was young when I loved Isolde, reckless. I made myself vulnerable because I didn't understand the price. I understand it now. I have paid it in full. I will not make the same mistakes." "But you'll make new ones," Lucian said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He met Wulfric's gaze steadily. "You say you're different, but you're still banning music. Sienna sings in your chambers where no one else can hear. You keep her hidden away. You're trying to have love without vulnerability, and it doesn't work that way. I'm protecting her. You're smothering her. And more than that, you're lying to yourself." Lucian stood, walking to stand beside Ravenna. "If you truly love her, if you truly believe this can work, then prove it. Let her sing for the court. Bring music back into these halls. Show us that you can love without fear. That's not, if you can't, then you haven't changed at all. You're still letting Isolde's death control you. And that means Sienna is just a replacement, something you keep locked away in your rooms to avoid dealing with your grief. How dare you? He's right, Sienna's voice cut through the room. She stood in the doorway, dressed in a simple gown, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. You're hiding me, Sienna. I thought you were protecting me, and maybe you are, but you're also protecting yourself. She walked into the council room, ignoring the stares of the assembled vampires. You say you love me, but you won't let anyone hear me sing. You keep me in your rooms like a secret, like something shameful. You're not shameful. You're precious. I won't risk you. Then you don't trust yourself to keep me safe, or you don't trust me to be strong enough to survive your world. She stopped in front of him. I'm not Isolde. I'm not going to shatter if someone looks at me wrong. I've survived things you can't imagine. I can survive this too, but only if you let me. He stared at her, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. She was right. Lucian was right. He was still afraid, still letting old wounds dictate present choices. What do you want? He asked finally. I want to sing, really sing, the way I used to before Marcus died. I want to fill these silent halls with music. She reached up, touching his face. And I want you to listen without being afraid. He closed his eyes. The thought of her voice ringing through the court, of making himself vulnerable again, sent ice through his veins. But the thought of losing her, of watching her wither in his chambers like a bird in a cage, was worse. All right, he said quietly. You'll sing for the court. Tomorrow night. Murmurs erupted around the room. Sienna smiled, fierce and bright. Thank you. He spent the next day preparing, which meant threatening anyone who looked like they might cause trouble. He made it absolutely clear that Sienna was under his protection, that any insult to her was an insult to him, and that he would tolerate neither. Lucian watched him work with barely concealed amusement. Feeling nervous? No. You've executed 3 people for imaginary slights and banned 4 more from court for the next decade. You're nervous. I'm being thorough. You're being terrified. It's almost endearing. Lucian clapped him on the shoulder. She'll be fine, and so will you. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her. You've made sure of that. Now you just have to trust yourself. That night, the court gathered in the great hall for the first time in 100 years. Wulfric had ordered the space opened and cleaned, had servants bring in chairs and light candles. The result was something close to the old concert halls he'd built for Isolde, though smaller, more intimate. He tried not to think about the parallels. Sienna appeared at the stroke of midnight, dressed in a gown of deep blue that made her skin glow. She looked nervous but determined, her chin high. She met his eyes across the room and smiled. He didn't smile back. He couldn't. He was too busy fighting down panic. She walked to the center of the room where a space had been cleared for her. The court watched in absolute silence. Wulfric sat on his throne and tried to breathe. I've never performed before, Sienna said, her voice carrying through the hall. I sing for myself, to process grief and pain and everything else that hurts. But Wulfric asked me to share that with you tonight, so I will. She looked at him. This is for everyone who's ever lost someone, for everyone who's ever had to learn to live around a hole in their heart. Then she sang. The melody was one he hadn't heard before, slow and aching and full of longing. Her voice filled the hall, rich and raw and absolutely fearless. She sang about loss and love and the terrible courage it took to keep breathing when someone you loved no longer could. She sang about her brother, about mornings that came anyway, about learning to carry grief like a stone in your pocket always there, but no longer crushing. Wulfric listened and felt 100 years of ice begin to thaw. He'd loved Isolde's voice, but it had been polished, perfect, meant for performance. Sienna's voice was nothing like that. It was messy and human and real. It held every crack and flaw and desperate hope. It was everything Isolde's had never been. When she finished, silence hung in the hall for a long moment. Then someone began to applaud, then another. Then the entire court was on their feet, filling the space with sound. Sienna looked stunned. She'd expected tolerance, perhaps, or polite acknowledgement. Not this. not genuine appreciation. Wulfric rose from his throne and walked to her. The applause faded as the court watched him approach. He reached her and dropped to one knee before her, in full view of everyone. "Wulfric," she whispered. "I have been afraid for 100 years," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Afraid of love, of vulnerability, of anything that might make me weak. I let that fear turn me cold. I banned music from these halls because I couldn't bear to hear it, couldn't bear to remember what I'd lost." He took her hands in his. "But you reminded me that grief and beauty can coexist, that love is worth the risk of loss, that being alive means being willing to hurt." Wulfric: "Oh, I love you, Sienna Oaks. Not as a replacement for anyone I've lost, but as yourself. As the woman who sings through pain, who faces vampires without flinching, who's strong enough to call me on my cowardice." He met her eyes. "I'm lifting the ban on music. As of tonight, these halls will sing again. And I'm asking you to stay with me, to fill my home and my life with your voice, if you'll have me." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He stood, pulling her into his arms, kissing her in front of the entire court. Let them see, let them know. He was done hiding. The applause started again, louder this time. As the court celebrated around them, Ravenna approached. She inclined her head to Sienna, a gesture of respect. "You have a beautiful voice." "Thank you. More than that, you have courage. It takes strength to stand before a court of vampires and bare your soul." She looked at Wulfric. "I was wrong to question this. Forgive me, my lord." "There's nothing to forgive. You were protecting the court. That's your duty." He kept one arm around Sienna. "But understand this. She is not a weakness. She is a strength. Anyone who thinks otherwise will learn differently." Ravenna smiled slightly. "I don't think anyone will question that after tonight." Over the following weeks, music returned to the manor, like water flowing back into a dry riverbed. Sienna sang almost every night, sometimes for the court, sometimes for small gatherings, sometimes just for Wulfric in his chambers. Other vampires began to hum, to play instruments that had been put away a century ago, to remember what it felt like to create beauty instead of just existing in silence. The halls transformed. They became warmer, richer, more alive. But not everyone was pleased. Lucian brought the news 2 months after Sienna's first performance. "There's a problem. Casimir has returned from the Western Territories." Wulfric looked up from where he was reading. Sienna curled against his side. "Casimir is always a problem. What does he want?" "To challenge your rule. He's been spreading rumors that you've grown weak again, that you're distracted by your human pet." Lucian's expression was grim. "He's gathering support from some of the older vampires who remember Isolde. They think history is repeating itself." "Let him challenge me then. I'll remind him why he's been hiding in the West for the past century. It's not that simple. He's not challenging you directly. He's going after her." Lucian nodded toward Sienna. "He thinks if he can prove she makes you vulnerable, he can turn the court against you." Sienna had gone still against him. "He's going to try to kill me." "He's going to try," Wulfric corrected. "He will fail. You can't be with me every moment. I can, and I will. That's what he wants. He wants you distracted, hovering over me instead of running your territory." She pulled away from him, standing. "I won't be used as a weapon against you." "You're not a weapon. You're under my protection." "Which makes me a liability." She crossed her arms. "Be honest. If something happened to me, would it weaken you? Would it distract you enough for someone like Casimir to take advantage?" He wanted to lie, wanted to tell her that he'd be fine, that he was too strong to be affected. But he'd promised not to hide from her. "Yes, if you died, it would destroy me, just like losing Isolde did. Then we need to solve this, not by hiding me away, but by making sure no one can use me against you. How do you propose we do that?" "Turn me," she said it calmly, as though suggesting they go for a walk. "Make me a vampire, then I can defend myself, then I won't be a weakness." Silence filled the room. Wulfric stared at her. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do. I've spent 2 months living among vampires. I know what it means. You know the surface. You don't know the hunger, the isolation, the weight of eternity. You don't know what it's like to watch centuries pass and everyone you've ever known turn to dust." "I know that I love you. I know that I want to be with you, really with you, not just for a few human decades. I know that I'm tired of being protected like a China doll." She moved closer to him. "And I know that if I were a vampire, this Casimir wouldn't be able to use me as a weapon. I'd be your equal, not your weakness. You're already my equal. Not in their eyes. In the court's eyes, I'm a temporary distraction, something fragile that will break. But if I were one of you, if I stood beside you as your consort instead of your pet, everything would change." He closed his eyes. "Sienna, I've thought about this. I'm not asking impulsively." She took his hands. "Marcus is dead. My human life ended the day he died. Everything after that has been just going through the motions. But you gave me a reason to live again. You gave me purpose. I want to stay with you, forever, if you'll have me. There's no going back. Once you're turned, you're turned. You'll never see sunlight again. You'll have to drink blood to survive. You'll watch the human world change and move on without you. I know. You'll outlive anyone you care about. Your friends, your co-workers, everyone. I don't have anyone left. Marcus was the last person who mattered, except you." He stared at her, searching for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. "You're certain?" "Absolutely certain." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Then I'll do it, but not yet. Not while Casimir is circling. If I turn you now, while you're weak and transitioning, he'll strike. We wait until he makes his move, until I've dealt with him. Then I'll give you eternity." "How long will that take?" "Not long. He's never been patient." Casimir made his move 3 nights later. Sienna was singing in the great hall, a regular occurrence now, when the doors burst open. A vampire she didn't recognize strode in, flanked by a dozen others. He was tall and elegant, with the white hair and pale skin of their kind, but his eyes were cruel. "How touching," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. The mighty Wulfric Falkenrath, brought to his knees by a human songbird, just like before. Wulfric rose from his throne, power flooding the room. "Casimir, you're not welcome here." "I'm not here for your welcome. I'm here to remind the court what happens when our king forgets himself." Casimir gestured toward Sienna. "You've let this creature bewitch you. You've brought music back into our halls, made yourself soft again. History is repeating, and you're too blind to see it. I see clearly. I see a fool who thinks he can challenge me in my own court. I'm not challenging you. I'm challenging your judgment." Casimir moved closer to Sienna. She stood her ground, refusing to show fear. "This human is a liability. As long as she lives, you're vulnerable. Anyone with sense can see it. Then it's fortunate you have no sense." Wulfric blurred across the room, putting himself between Casimir and Sienna. "Touch her and die." "That's my point exactly. You're so focused on protecting her that you've forgotten to protect yourself." Casimir gestured, and his followers spread out through the hall. "Your court is divided, Wulfric. Half of them remember Isolde. Remember how her death nearly destroyed you. They won't follow a king who can be controlled through his weaknesses. I am not controlled. Aren't you? You're here, defending a human instead of expanding our territory. You've spent the past 2 months singing lullabies instead of ruling. You're weak. I am a king who has chosen to live instead of merely existing. That's not weakness, that's strength." "Prove it then. Kill her." Casimir said it casually, as though suggesting they have wine. "If she truly doesn't make you weak, if you're still the same ruthless king who destroyed your enemies 100 years ago, then you should have no problem ending her life. She's just a human. They die every day." The court had gone absolutely silent. Every eye was on Wulfric. Sienna could feel the weight of the moment, the trap Casimir had laid. If Wulfric refused, it would look like weakness. If he agreed, she died. She stepped forward before Wulfric could respond. "You want proof he's not weak? I'll give it to you." "Sienna." Wulfric reached for her, but she moved out of his grasp. "You think I'm his weakness because I'm human, because I can be killed easily." She walked toward Casimir, ignoring Wulfric's sharp intake of breath. "You're wrong. I'm not his weakness. I'm his choice. And there's nothing weak about choosing to love something despite the risk." "Pretty words," Casimir said. "But words don't change reality. You're fragile, temporary, a distraction." "Then prove it. Fight me." The room erupted in murmurs. Casimir laughed. "Fight you? You're human. I'm under the protection of the vampire king. That means something, doesn't it? Or is the word of your king worthless?" She held his gaze. If you truly believe I'm just a weak human, it should be easy to defeat me. But if you refuse, everyone here will know you're afraid. Casimir's expression darkened. I'm not afraid of you. Then accept the challenge. Single combat, right here, right now. If I'm as weak as you claim, you'll win easily and prove your point. But if I win, you leave this court and never return. And if you lose, you die. If I lose, I die. She said it calmly, though her heart was racing. Do you accept? Casimir looked at Wulfric, who was standing absolutely still, his face a mask of control. You'd let her do this? Wulfric's jaw was tight. She is her own person. She makes her own choices. How progressive? Casimir turned back to Sienna. Very well, I accept your challenge. Let's see how long the little human lasts. Sienna had about 3 seconds to regret her decision before Casimir moved. He was fast, faster than anything human, but she'd been living among vampires for 2 months. She'd watched them move, learned to anticipate their speed. When he reached for her throat, she ducked, rolled, came up with one of the silver knives she'd taken to carrying after the first attack. Casimir hissed, pulling back from the blade. Silver, clever. I pay attention. She circled him, keeping the knife between them. Her human speed was a disadvantage, but her size was an advantage. She was smaller, more agile. She just had to avoid being caught. Casimir lunged again. This time she couldn't dodge fast enough. His hand caught her arm, yanking her forward. She twisted, slashing with the knife, catching him across the chest. He snarled, throwing her across the room. She hit the floor hard, stars exploding across her vision. Blood filled her mouth. She heard Wulfric roar, felt his power shake the hall, but she forced herself to her feet. If he intervened, it would prove Casimir right. Stay back, she gasped. This is my fight. Casimir was on her again, faster now, angry. She blocked one blow, took another to the ribs that cracked bone. She couldn't win. She was going to die. But she could make it mean something. She let him catch her, let him think he'd won. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. She couldn't breathe. Her vision started to gray. With the last of her strength, she drove the silver knife up under his ribs, aiming for where a heart would be. Casimir screamed. His grip loosened. She fell, gasping, and Wulfric was there, catching her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he whispered. You're safe. Casimir staggered back, staring at the knife in his chest in disbelief. You stabbed me. I did, Sienna's voice was rough, and I'd do it again. You little... He reached for the knife, but Lucian was suddenly there, along with half the court. They surrounded Casimir, weapons drawn. The challenge is over, Lucian said quietly. You lost. She cheated. She used the tools available to her. That's called being smart. Lucian looked at Wulfric. Your orders, my lord? Wulfric was still holding Sienna, his face pressed against her hair. When he looked up, his eyes were black with rage. Casimir challenged my judgment. He threatened my consort. He broke the peace of my court. His voice was cold, absolute. He dies. My lord, he dies now, in front of everyone. Let it be a lesson to anyone else who thinks to use the people I love as weapons against me. Casimir tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before Wulfric was on him, moving so fast Sienna barely saw it. There was a wet sound, a scream that cut off abruptly. And then Casimir was ash on the floor. Wulfric turned to face the court, blood on his hands. Anyone else want to question whether I'm still fit to rule? Silence. Then, one by one, every vampire in the hall dropped to one knee. Wulfric nodded once, then turned back to Sienna. You're hurt. I'm alive. You could have died. You should have let me fight him. If you'd fought him, it would have proven him right. It had to be me. She touched his face. And I won. You nearly got yourself killed. But I didn't. I survived. Because you taught me how. Because I'm stronger than he thought. She smiled, tasting blood. Not bad for a weak little human. He kissed her forehead, gentle despite the violence still singing in his veins. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Flatterer. He carried her out of the hall to his chambers, where he laid her carefully on the bed and began checking her injuries. 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, various cuts and bruises. Nothing permanent, but painful. I'm turning you tonight, he said as he cleaned a cut on her temple. I'm not waiting any longer. I can't watch you bleed again. All right? You're sure? I was sure before. I'm certain now. She caught his hand. Do it. Make me yours. Forever. He kissed her then, long and deep, trying to memorize the warmth of her human body, the beat of her mortal heart. Then he pulled back and met her eyes. This will hurt. The transformation is agony, but I'll be with you through all of it, I swear. I know. He bit his own wrist, let his blood well dark and rich, and offered it to her. Drink. 3 swallows. That's all you need. She drank. His blood was strange, metallic and cold and somehow electric. It burned going down. She gasped, pulling back after the 3rd swallow, and he immediately bit into her throat. The pain was instant and overwhelming. It felt like fire in her veins, like her body was being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside out. She screamed, couldn't help it, and he held her tighter, whispering reassurances she couldn't hear over the agony. It lasted hours, days, eternities. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the pain, and Wulfric's arms around her and his voice in her ear telling her to hold on. Just hold on. It would end soon. When it finally did end, the world was different. She could hear everything, the servants moving in distant halls, conversations 3 floors below, the heartbeat of a rat in the walls. She could smell blood and stone and the scent of every vampire in the manor. She could feel power thrumming through her body, strength that hadn't been there before. She opened her eyes. The room was dark, but she could see perfectly. Wulfric was kneeling beside the bed, watching her with an expression caught between hope and fear. Sienna? She sat up slowly. Her body felt different, stronger, hungrier. It worked. Relief flooded his face. How do you feel? Different, powerful, hungry. She looked at her hands, saw how pale they'd become. Did my hair change? It's white now, like mine, like all of us. He touched it gently. You're beautiful. I'm a vampire. You are. Truly one of us now. He pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry it hurt so much. I'd do it again. She held him tight, reveling in her new strength. This is what I wanted. To be with you. To be your equal. You were always my equal. Now everyone else will believe it too. Over the following weeks, she learned to navigate her new existence. The hunger was harder than she'd expected, the way blood called to her whenever a human passed nearby. But Wulfric taught her control, taught her how to feed without killing, how to manage the instincts that came with immortality. She also discovered she was faster, stronger than most newly turned vampires. Wulfric said it was because of the strength she'd had as a human, the resilience that had let her survive losing Marcus. She'd been forged by grief before the transformation. It had made her harder to break. The court accepted her more easily, now that she was one of them. Ravenna became something like a friend, teaching her vampire politics and court etiquette. Lucian treated her as he would any of Wulfric's advisors, with respect and dry humor. And her singing changed. Her voice was deeper now, richer, with an unearthly quality that came from no longer needing to breathe. When she sang, the entire court stopped to listen. It was as though her music had been amplified by the transformation, made more than human. Wulfric listened the same way he had from the beginning, like every note mattered, like her voice was the only sound in the world worth hearing. 3 months after her transformation, he asked her to marry him. They were in his chambers, tangled together after making love, when he suddenly pulled back and produced a ring from seemingly nowhere. It was old, antique, with a black diamond set in silver. This was my mother's, he said quietly. I've carried it for 3 centuries, waiting for someone worth giving it to. Marry me, Sienna. Be my wife, my queen, my partner for eternity. She stared at the ring, at him, and felt tears well up. Vampires could still cry, she'd learned, though it happened rarely. Yes? Yes, of course, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her hands, her wrists, her mouth. I love you. I will love you until the stars burn out. I love you too. Thank you for teaching me how to live again. They were married a month later in the great hall, surrounded by the entire court. Sienna wore a gown of deep crimson, the color of blood and roses. Wulfric wore black, stark, and regal. Lucian officiated, using vows that were centuries old, binding them together in the eyes of vampire law. When Wulfric kissed her, sealing the marriage, the court erupted in applause. Music swelled through the hall instruments and voices blending together in a symphony of celebration. After the ceremony, Sienna stood in the center of the hall and sang. She sang about loss and love, about grief transformed into hope, about finding home in unexpected places. She sang about a girl who'd lost her brother and wanted to stop existing, and about a king who'd forgotten how to live. She sang about how they'd saved each other. When she finished, Wulfric stood and crossed to her. He took her hands and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, 100 years ago, I banned music from these halls because I thought beauty made me weak. I was wrong. Beauty is what makes us strong. Love is what makes us strong. And this woman, my wife, my queen, has taught me that truth. He turned to address the court. From this day forward, let music fill these halls. Let us remember that we are not just predators surviving in the dark. We are beings capable of creating beauty, of loving deeply, of living fully. That is what it means to be truly immortal, not simply to exist forever, but to find reasons to want to. The court cheered. Sienna pulled him close and kissed him, feeling joy so complete it almost hurt. Years passed, then decades. Sienna learned to navigate immortality with the same determination she'd brought to surviving grief. She sang regularly for the court, her voice becoming legendary among vampires throughout the territories. Humans occasionally heard rumors of a singer in the old cathedral district whose voice could make you weep, though no one ever found the source. She and Wulfric ruled together, partners in every sense. She was involved in court politics, in decisions about territory and law. She proved herself a capable queen, sharp-minded and fair. The court respected her not because she was Wulfric's wife, but because she'd earned it. They traveled sometimes, visiting other vampire territories, seeing how the world changed. They watched cities rise and fall, watched technology transform human life. They adapted, survived, thrived. And every night, when they were alone, Wulfric would ask her to sing, just for him. The way she had in her shabby apartment all those years ago, when her voice had reached through the walls and caught the heart of a king who'd forgotten he still had one. 50 years after their wedding, they stood together on the balcony of their manor, looking out over the city lights. The modern world sprawled before them, bright and busy and beautifully alive. Do you ever regret it? Wulfric asked. Giving up the sun? Giving up your human life? No, she leaned against him. I gave up existing for living. That's not a sacrifice. That's a gift. You gave me a gift too. You reminded me why immortality is worth having. We gave each other gifts then. Fair trade. He kissed the top of her head. Sing for me. Always. And there, on the balcony with the city spread below them and eternity stretched ahead, Sienna Falkenrath sang. Her voice rose into the night, clear and strong and no longer sad. She sang about love that survived loss, about finding home in darkness, about two broken people who'd put each other back together. Wulfric listened and knew that no matter how many centuries passed, he would never tire of this, of her voice, her presence, her love. She'd taken his silent halls and filled them with music. She'd taken his frozen heart and taught it to beat again. She'd saved him, and in return, he'd given her forever. The song ended. The night waited, and together they walked back inside their home, ready for whatever eternity brought next.